I want to start with something personal. A few years ago, I had this conversation with a friend, someone I'd known since university, smart guy, genuinely kind, the kind of man who actually showed up. He called me on a random Tuesday and said something I've never forgotten. He said, "Chan, I'm not angry, I'm not bitter, I'm just done trying." And then he said something that's been living in my head ever since. He said, "The math just stopped working." That conversation is honestly why I went so deep on this. Because I knew dozens of men who felt exactly what he was describing, and none of them had words for it. And the women in their lives had no idea it was even happening. So, let me ask you something. What does it actually take for a man to stop trying? Not a lazy man, not someone who checked out from day one. I mean, a man who genuinely showed up, texted first, planned the dates, opened himself up emotionally, until one day he just didn't anymore. What happened in between? Because that gap between the man who tried everything and the man who quietly walked away, that's where everything important lives. Here's the first uncomfortable layer. If you ask most people why men are pulling back, you get the same answers every time. They're afraid of commitment, they're immature, they've been hurt. And look, sometimes that's true, but I want to push past that. Because what I keep seeing in the data, in real conversations, in patterns that show up over and over, is something way more structural than individual character flaws. About 10.5% of men in their prime working years, roughly 6.8 million men, are now neither working nor looking for work, compared to just 2.5% in 1954, which is wild when you think about it. The world didn't run out of work. Something else shifted, something internal. And here's the deeper question hiding inside that statistic. When a man stops trying, is he giving up? Or is he doing a calculation? Is he failing? Or responding to something real that nobody wants to say out loud? I want to be honest before we go further. This isn't a video about men being victims. It's not about blaming anyone. I'm trying to trace the actual psychology, both sides, because I genuinely think both sides are missing something the other never explains. So, think about a man in his late 20s or early 30s today. Does everything he was told to do. Labor force participation among U.S. men aged 25 to 34 fell to 89%. That's over 700,000 fewer young men showing up to work compared to 2004. But here's what nobody reports alongside that number. Those men weren't lazy. A lot of them tried for years. They invested in education, careers, relationships, and somewhere along the way, the return stopped matching the investment. Since 1980, men without a 4-year degree have seen their real earnings drop by 30%. Now, stack that on top of a dating landscape that feels even less forgiving. A 2024 survey found 78% of dating app users felt emotionally exhausted by online dating, at least sometimes, and men reported burnout nearly as often as women at 74%. So, what does a man actually do when he runs that calculation? Adds up the effort, the emotional exposure, the financial pressure, the rejection, and the numbers come back in the red? Most people assume he tries harder. That's always been the story, right? The persistent man wins. Keep going, get the girl. But that's not what the data shows. And honestly, it's not what I've seen either. What actually happens, and this is the part most people completely skip, is that a man doesn't dramatically quit. He doesn't announce it. No tantrum. He just slowly redirects, stops initiating, stops investing emotionally, starts building a life that doesn't depend on something that keeps not working. And he does it quietly. No drama, no press release. More young people are avoiding dating altogether. And Pew Research found 1 in 4 40-year-old Americans have never been married. That's not a fringe thing. That's a cultural shift. And it's moving faster than anyone's narrative has caught up to. Now here's where I want to slow down. Because this is the part nobody talks about from either side. Women look at a man who stopped trying and often read it as rejection, emotional unavailability, damaged goods. That reading feels intuitive, but I want to offer a different frame from a behavioral science perspective. What men are experiencing has a specific name. Research describes a model where men invest time and energy to build their value as partners, and when the return on that investment declines, their engagement declines with it. That's not a character flaw. That's a rational response to changed incentives. The problem is, women experience the downstream effect without ever seeing the upstream cause. And I need you to really hear this. The man isn't punishing anyone. He's not running some strategy. He's not sitting somewhere plotting how to make someone chase him. He genuinely did the math, found the equation broken, and stopped. Here's the specific thing women miss when this happens. They see the withdrawal and assume something broke inside him. Sometimes they try harder, reach out more, become more available, and he still doesn't come back. Not because he's playing games, because his internal framework already shifted. The things she's offering now, availability, warmth, effort, would have worked a year ago. It lands differently on a man who's already moved on emotionally. More and more men are withdrawing from relationships. Not because they don't want love, because the emotional cost feels too high. And here's what's fascinating. That withdrawal often looks from the outside exactly like confidence. The man seems settled, content, not reactive. And women who associate unavailability with high value hit this paradox. The behavior they find most attractive is actually a symptom of something deeply exhausted. Let me push one layer deeper. Because here's the question I never hear anyone ask. What if men stopping trying isn't the problem? What if it's a signal? For decades, the cultural script told men, be present, show effort, express vulnerability, pursue. And millions of men did exactly that. After 3 months of regular dating app use, men reported a 27% increase in loneliness and a 39% decrease in self-esteem. The effort produced the opposite of what it was supposed to. Not because they were doing it wrong, because the environment stopped rewarding it. Men are watching older generations, fathers, uncles who worked 60-hour weeks and came home feeling invisible. And they're doing what any psychologically healthy person does when they watch a losing pattern play out in front of them repeatedly. They refuse to repeat it. That's not bitterness. That's pattern recognition. But here's the uncomfortable flip side. Because I said I don't take sides, and I mean it. The men who've stopped trying aren't all making clean, conscious, healthy decisions. A lot of them are making the right call for the wrong reasons. They're not recalibrating from self-knowledge. They're retreating from pain. And there's a massive difference between a man who chooses solitude because he's genuinely at peace and a man who chooses isolation because he's given up on being understood. 15% of men report having no close friends. Men receive emotional support from friends half as often as women do. That's not something to celebrate. A man with no close friendships, no emotional community, no relationship. He's not proof that men don't need connection. He's proof of what happens when the cost of connection consistently outweighs the reward. And women need to understand what they're walking into when they meet this man. Because they will meet him. He might seem independent, low maintenance, grounded, calm, emotionally stable. Exactly what they've been looking for. But underneath that stillness, there's often a man who genuinely stopped believing that showing up produces anything. Not because he's broken, because he's been conditioned. You see fewer first moves, less chasing, longer pauses between attempts. Men may still care deeply, but they're choosing distance over disappointment. And that phrase, distance over disappointment, is honestly the most important thing in this entire conversation. Because here's what it reveals. It's not that men stopped wanting intimacy. It's that intimacy started feeling like a guaranteed loss. And when your brain associates something you want with consistent pain, it does what brains do. it stops wanting it, not permanently, but long enough that from the outside, it looks exactly like indifference. So, what's actually being built right now, underneath all the statistics and cultural noise? I think, and look, this is my read. On it, if current trends hold, birth rates declining, marriage rates declining, sex rates declining, especially in young people, we're not heading toward a world where men and women simply coexist separately. We're heading toward a world where both sides have genuinely lost the map to each other, not because of hatred, because of accumulated miscommunication that neither side ever traced back to its source. The 2040 prediction isn't men disappearing, it's mutual unintelligibility. Two groups of people who want the same thing, real connection, but have developed such different emotional languages, such different risk calculations, such different damage patterns, that they keep standing in the same room and completely missing each other. And I find that genuinely heartbreaking, not dramatic, heartbreaking, because the solution isn't complicated, but it requires something most people resist. It requires one side to stop assuming they already understand what's happening on the other side. It requires a woman to look at a man who stopped trying and ask a different question than, what's wrong with him? It requires a man who stopped trying to ask himself whether the wall he built for protection has become the thing blocking what he actually wants. The math my friend said stopped working, that math can change, but only when both people understand what variables are actually in the equation, not the ones they assume were there, the real ones. That's the shift. That's always been the shift. Not louder demands from either side, just the willingness to understand what's happening on the other side of the silence. Because the men who stopped trying didn't stop wanting. They stopped believing it was possible. And the only way back from that isn't strategy. It isn't pressure. It isn't waiting for the other person to change first. It's understanding. Real, specific, honest understanding. That's what changes everything.